You know that moment when life is going great, coffee's hot, projects are on track, and then bam, an envelope shows up that smells like disappointment in HOA authority? Yeah, that was my Tuesday. I swear, the letter even looked smug. Beige, lifeless, the color of cubicle walls and crushed optimism. The kind of letter that doesn't even need to be opened to ruin your day. It just radiates bureaucracy. And the sender? The Creekwood Commons Homeowners Association, the self-appointed keepers of beige conformity and the sworn enemies of joy, personality, and apparently vans. Now, let me back up a second. My name's Alex. I'm a woodworker, not the whittling on the porch kind. No, I'm the slab-wrangling, sawdust-breathing, this table will outlive your entire bloodline kind of craftsman. My world is simple. A garage full of tools, the constant hum of creation, and a trusty van that's been with me through every splinter and splat of varnish. Her name's Vanna White. Yeah, I named her after the game show legend. Because, like the real Vanna, my van reveals beautiful things. She's a 10-year-old Ford Transit with a few scratches, a squeaky door, and more heart than most HOA board members combined. Every tool inside had a place. Every screw, its home. She wasn't just a van, she was my mobile command center, my lifeline, my coworker. That Tuesday started perfectly. I just finished a monster project, a cherry wood bookshelf taller than most egos in my neighborhood. It had a rolling ladder, brass rails, the works. I was feeling good, that rare, peaceful moment where you stand back and admire what your hands built. And then I grabbed the mail. There it was, tucked between a pizza coupon booklet and a letter addressed to a homeowner who's been dead for 3 years. Because, of course, the HOA doesn't waste postage updating their records, only enforcing rules. I open it. Notice of violation. Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C. Translation? I had committed the unforgivable sin of parking my work van in my own driveway. The photo attached looked like it was taken by a raccoon with night vision, grainy, black and white, with a giant red circle drawn around my business name on the side. The letter declared, fine, $150, offense, parking a commercial vehicle. I laughed at first, that sort of baffled, dry, you've got to be kidding me laugh. Commercial vehicle? My van? The same one I drive to get milk and plywood? Apparently, the mere existence of a tiny decal, my name and phone number in tasteful gray font, transformed it into a corporate menace. Meanwhile, every SUV on the block has dealership stickers, university crests, and my kid is an honor student decals the size of billboards. But sure, my logo? Offensive. And let's be real. Commercial vehicles sounds like I'm running a fleet of dump trucks, not delivering custom shelves. My van isn't some diesel-belching monstrosity. It's not even loud. It's quieter than half the lawnmowers in Creekwood Commons. I call my buddy Dave. Bro, you're not gonna believe this. What's up? Did you finally trim your grass below HOA height? No, worse. They fined me for Vanna. For what? Existing? Apparently, she's a commercial vehicle. Cue Dave absolutely losing it on the other end of the phone. He laughed so hard I could hear the wheezing through the speaker. Vanna, he said, is about as commercial as a toaster with a sticker. Still, I figured, okay, maybe I can reason with them. That was my first mistake. Cut to walking across the street to Carol's house. Carol Perkins, the HOA president, the crown jewel of Creekwood Commons, always seen in matching pastel tracksuits and a visor, the kind of woman who alphabetizes her spice rack and files complaints with the same enthusiasm people reserve for vacation photos. I walked up to her lawn, which, by the way, looked like it was grown from synthetic perfection, letter in hand, trying to smile like a reasonable adult. Hey, Carol, got your notice? Must be some kind of mix-up about my van. She gives me this tight smile, the kind that says, I'm pretending to be polite, but I secretly wish you'd vanish into an HOA meeting agenda. Oh, Alex, she says, no misunderstanding. The bylaws are quite clear. No commercial vehicles. It's my personal vehicle, I said. I use it for work, sure, but it's not a delivery truck. She tilts her head, like she's observing a peculiar species of bug. Oh, but it has lettering, Alex. Lettering makes it advertising. Advertising makes it commercial. We can't have that. It lowers property values. Ah, yes, property values. The HOA's holy word. This from the same woman whose husband mows the lawn in socks and sandals like it's performance art. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because Carol wasn't joking. The rule is the rule. It's for the good of the community. She ended with the classic HOA closer. You can always park it in your garage. She knew it didn't fit. That was the point. My garage is my workshop, every inch filled with timber, clamps, and creativity. That van is part of the business that funds the HOA fees that pay her salary to find me. Irony so rich it should be taxed. I walked home staring at that letter, the beige flag of suburban tyranny. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about power. And Carol, pastel visor and all, had just declared war. That night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by sawdust and resentment. The first instinct was to write an appeal, a strongly worded letter. Oh, and not just any letter, a masterpiece of bureaucratic rage. I poured Lysol and a thesaurus into it. Undue hardship, selective enforcement, gross overreach. I went full Shakespeare meets small claims court. I printed it on my best invoice paper, sealed it like a Declaration of Independence, and hand-delivered it to the HOA Dropbox. 8 days later, they mailed it back. Appeal denied. No explanation, no signature, just a check mark in a tiny box like someone's grocery list of petty tasks for the day. That was it. The moment the fuse was lit. Visual. Camera pans over the van, slow zoom to the logo on the side. I remember standing there looking at Vanna, my loyal paint-chipped partner, thinking if they want a war over appearances, fine, but they better be ready, because I wasn't going to play fair. HOA logic says I can't have a commercial vehicle, but they never said I couldn't have a lawn ornament on wheels, and that, my friends, is how chaos found its groove. Coming up next, the day Vanna White became a rolling lawn, and I accidentally invented the greatest act of HOA-approved rebellion ever. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in this case, it came in 12 rolls of AstroTurf and a bucket of industrial glue. Welcome to Operation Rolling Green, the most gloriously stupid act of compliance ever witnessed by suburbia. So there I was, sitting in my garage, staring at the van like it had personally insulted a deity. My appeal had been denied, the HOA had flexed their pastel-colored authority, and Carol Perkins was probably out there polishing her flamingo collection with smug satisfaction. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was inspired, that dangerous kind of inspired that makes people invent catapults or indoor fireworks. See, if you've ever tangled with an HOA, you know the golden rule. They thrive on technicalities. They'll use vague bylaws to trap you, but you can use the same vagueness to break free. And that's when it hit me. The HOA's letter said, no commercial vehicles. It also said, decorative lawn ornaments under 6 feet are permitted. I looked at my van, then at the lawn, then back at the van, and I swear I heard the faint echo of destiny whisper, do it. That's when Operation Rolling Lawn was born. Cut to late-night bar scene. Alex and Dave at a table littered with peanuts and blueprints. Dave almost spit his beer when I told him, wait, you're gonna turn your van into a lawn? Exactly. Like with grass? Exactly. Fake grass? Exactly. He just stared, then started laughing, that unstoppable, can't breathe kind of laugh. Alex, you've officially lost it. This is the dumbest and most brilliant idea I've ever heard. Exactly. The next morning, we hit the big box home improvement store. You know, the type. Fluorescent lighting, screaming toddlers, couples fighting over light fixtures, and 30 varieties of mulch that all look identical. We weren't there for mulch. We were there for turf. The green aisle called to me like a siren. There it was, the most aggressively unnatural shade of green you've ever seen, like radioactive lettuce. I ran my hand over the synthetic blades. It was rough, scratchy, and perfect. Dave, this is it. He squinted. It looks loud. Exactly, I said. It screams, I am lawn, respect my chlorophyll. We flagged down a teenage employee who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Hey, we need 12 rolls of this stuff. For what? He asked, dead inside. Landscaping, Dave said flatly. Vertical landscaping, I added with a smirk. The kid blinked twice and walked away like we'd just confessed to a crime. Next stop, adhesives. We needed something strong enough to bond turf to a van and withstand Curl's burning glare. We found an older employee with a glorious handlebar mustache and explained the plan. You're gluing fake grass to a car? He asked slowly, as if processing the words physically hurt. Technically a van, I said. He nodded thoughtfully. You want outdoor carpet adhesive, the kind that survives hurricanes. Once that stuff sets, not even the apocalypse will take it off. Perfect, I said. We're aiming for apocalypse proof. We loaded everything into Dave's pickup. 12 rolls of turf, industrial glue, utility knives, and a gnome because every proper lawn needs a gnome. By the time we checked out, we looked like we'd lost a fight with a Muppet. Green fibers everywhere. Back at the house, we faced our masterpiece, Vanna White, pristine and unrepentant. Dave stood with his arms crossed. You're sure about this? Positive, I said. If I'm going down as the guy who made his van photosynthesize. We started rolling out the turf. The first attempt looked rough. Crooked edges, glue blobs, big enough to qualify as speed bumps. Dude, it looks like a chia pet with mange. I steps back, hands on hips. Okay, we're learning. Learning quickly turned into panicking because guess what? Turf doesn't want to stick to metal. It wants to curl, slide, and mock you. By the end of day one, we were covered in glue, bits of fake grass, and despair. That's when I made the best decision of the whole operation. I called Gus. Cut to Gus's custom body and paint shop. Gus is a legend, the kind of man who's rebuilt more engines than most people have opinions. When I told him what I was doing, he didn't say a word for a full minute. Then he started laughing. Hard. The kind of laugh that comes from the soul. Let me guess, he wheezed. HOA trouble? How did you know? Kid, I can smell HOA nonsense from a mile away. It's like fresh paint and arrogance. I showed him the turf, the van, and the plan. This, he said, eyes gleaming, is the dumbest, most beautiful idea I've heard in 30 years. I'm in. It took a full week. Gus treated it like a restoration project. Meticulous, proud, and completely insane. He measured every panel, cut every strip, and even matched the turf's direction so it flowed like a real lawn in the breeze. Dave and I became his chaotic apprentices. We spent hours trimming edges around the headlights, sculpting turf to fit mirrors, and arguing over whether the grass grain should go north-south or east-west for better aerodynamics. When the final piece was glued, Gus stepped back, wiped his hands, and said, "Behold, the most HOA-proof lawn in the country." He wasn't wrong. Cut to Sarah enters the scene. My neighbor Sarah, graphic designer, occasional rebel, and longtime victim of Carol's aesthetic enforcement, came by one afternoon. "Alex, why is your van missing?" I said. "It's in the shop." She narrowed her eyes. "You're up to something, aren't you?" I showed her a photo of the half-finished rolling lawn. She gasped, then started laughing so hard she had to lean against the doorframe. "Oh my God, Carol's gonna explode." "That's the plan." "Well, then you're gonna need accessories." The next day, she showed up with a box, plastic daisies, a white picket fence decal, and a ceramic gnome flipping the bird. "For curb appeal," she said with a wink. We installed every last detail. Daisies around the gas cap, fence along the bottom panels, the gnome on the dashboard, our mascot of defiance. When it was done, we just stood there in awe. Vanna White was no longer a van. She was a 6-foot-tall mobile lawn, a green, glorious middle finger to petty bureaucracy. Driving that thing felt like leading a parade. People gawked, laughed, filmed, kids waved. A group of teenagers followed me down the highway cheering, "Let's go, Grassman!" By the time I pulled into Creekwood Commons, it felt like entering enemy territory in a fuzzy green tank. Curtains twitched, neighbors gasped, and I swear, somewhere in the distance, I heard Carol's internal processor short circuit. I parked in my driveway, perfectly within the lines, perfectly legal. I stepped out, took a deep breath, and admired the view. My driveway, my home, my absurd masterpiece. This wasn't vandalism. This was performance compliance. But the HOA wasn't about to let me bask in my chlorophyll-covered glory for long. Because where there's fake grass, there's real fury, and Carol was just getting warmed up. Coming up next, how my rolling lawn turned into a neighborhood scandal, a police visit, and the greatest HOA meltdown in modern suburban history.
When your HOA declares war over a decal, but you return fire with 12 rolls of fake grass, that's not rebellion, that's art. And as it turns out, art really ticks people off. The day the rolling lawn came home, time seemed to slow down. I could practically hear the collective gasp of Creekwood Commons echo through the cul-de-sac like a suburban battle cry. Curtains fluttered, dogs barked, a kid dropped his popsicle in shock, and then the inevitable. Carol Perkins' front door flung open like the gates of hell itself. There she was, HOA president, defender of the beige order, draped in a baby blue tracksuit that radiated fury. She stared across the street, mouth slightly agape, like she was witnessing the end of civilization. "Alex," she hissed as she stormed across the road, each step crunching on perfectly trimmed gravel. "What is that?" I smiled sweetly. "That? Oh, that's my decorative lawn ornament." Her face twitched. "Your what?" "My lawn ornament," I repeated, motioning toward the van. "Under 6 feet, well-maintained, and fully compliant with Section 8 of your precious bylaws. It's just mobile." She blinked. Once, twice, then went through all 5 stages of HOA grief: disbelief, anger, bargaining, confusion, and finally, pure incandescent rage. "You cannot be serious," she sputtered. "Oh, I'm serious, dead serious. Look, no lettering, no business info, no commercial purpose, just turf and good vibes." Carol's jaw tightened so hard I thought she'd crack a tooth. "This is not what we meant by decorative lawn ornament." "Well," I said cheerfully, "you might want to define that more clearly in the next revision." She glared, spun on her heel, and stomped away like a furious flamingo. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled down the street. Now, I want to make something clear. If you've never seen 2 police officers trying not to laugh at a turf-covered van, you haven't truly lived. The older one walked up, doing his best to look professional. "Good afternoon, sir. We got a call about, He looked down at his notes. "A modified commercial vehicle?" "You must mean my lawn ornament, officer."
I said deadpan. The younger cop behind him snorted so hard he had to turn away. Right, the older one continued, fighting a smirk. Well, the complainant, Miss Perkins, claims it violates community ordinances. I handed him the printed HOA bylaws like I was presenting a sacred text. You'll find no violation, officer. No business use, no signage, no height issue. Just a man beautifying his driveway. He sighed, radioed in, and said, "Dispatch, we're at 12 Oak. Yeah, it's a vehicle covered in AstroTurf. No, I'm not kidding. No, it's not stolen. It's compliant, technically. Advice complainant, it's a civil matter." He turned back to me, grin finally breaking through. "Well, Mr. Peterson, looks like you're in the clear. But, my advice, get a lawyer and a good sense of humor. I've got one of those. Guess which?" They left and the neighborhood erupted. People came out of their houses, phones in hand, laughing, cheering, taking selfies with the van. For the first time in Creekwood Commons history, unity bloomed, and it smelled like plastic grass. Dave popped out from behind a hedge like an over-caffeinated spy. "Dude, that was the most glorious thing I've ever seen. Carol looked like she swallowed a lemon dipped in bleach." We high-fived. The revolution had begun. By sunset, the whole block was buzzing. The rolling lawn had gone viral. Neighbors texting neighbors, kids posting TikToks, local Facebook groups lighting up with posts like, "What is this green van on Oak Street?" By the next morning, a local news van pulled up. Ironically, less interesting than mine. A reporter with perfect hair stepped out, microphone in hand. "Mr. Peterson, what message are you trying to send with this unique vehicle?" I shrugged. "Just a man and his love for well-maintained lawns, ma'am." Cut to the next day, my phone blowing up. Some people called me a hero, others called me insane. Both were right. Meanwhile, Carol was in full meltdown mode. She was out in her yard with the clipboard, taking photos from every conceivable angle, muttering to herself like a suburban supervillain. By that evening, new flyers were taped to every mailbox in Creekwood Commons. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m., topic, the grass menace. Yes, she actually called it that. Somewhere, George Lucas wept. The meeting was chaos from the start. The community clubhouse, usually empty except for 2 retirees complaining about mailbox paint, was packed, standing room only. Everyone wanted to see the showdown. Carol stood at the front like a dictator on the brink of overthrow, armed with a slideshow labeled Exhibit A, the van. Her PowerPoint included photos of every inch of the rolling lawn, close-ups, aerial shots, even a zoomed-in image of the gnome flipping the bird. "This," she declared, voice trembling with indignation, "is an affront to our community's aesthetic integrity." Gasps, murmurs. One guy in the back muttered, "It's actually kind of awesome." Carol ignored him. "It lowers property values. It mocks our bylaws. I raised my hand. She stopped mid-rant. "Yes, Mr. Peterson? I just want to point out, technically, it raises curb appeal." The crowd laughed. Carol's eye twitched. She launched into her next argument, clicking through slides like she was prosecuting a war crime. "I move that we fine Mr. Peterson $1,000 and demand immediate removal." A few board members nodded. The rest looked tired. One old man whispered, "Did we really call the cops over fake grass?" Then my turn. I walked to the front, binder in hand, calm, smiling like a man who knows his turf is bulletproof. "Good evening, everyone. My name's Alex, proud owner of the Rolling Lawn, now technically the greenest property in Creekwood Commons." Laughter rippled through the room. Now, Carol's right about one thing. This is about our rules. I read them. Actually, I memorized them. And nowhere does it say a lawn ornament has to stay still. Nowhere does it say it can't have wheels, or headlights, or a gnome co-pilot. I went through every line Sarah, my neighbor turned legal strategist, had highlighted. The height limits, the undefined good condition clause, the aesthetic loopholes. This isn't defiance. It's compliance, just creatively interpreted. Because when rules get absurd, sometimes the only sane response is to be absurd right back. The room exploded in applause. Carol looked like someone had just told her flamingos were illegal. Then came the moment that changed everything. Mrs. Gable, the same woman who once complained about a neighbor's garden gnome staring at her kitchen, stood up and shouted, "She fined me because my welcome mat had too much whimsy." That broke the dam. Neighbors started shouting their own HOA horror stories. She made me repaint my fence twice because the color was too cheerful. She banned wind chimes. She told me my bird feeder was politically divisive. The room descended into chaos, glorious, democracy-fueled chaos. A motion was made not to fine me, but to hold a vote of no confidence in Carol Perkins as HOA president. The vote passed in a landslide. Carol, stunned, pale, and dethroned, was removed on the spot. The same people she'd policed for years stood up, cheering, clapping, some even hugging me. Dave popped out from behind a hedge like an over-caffeinated spy. Dude, that was the most glorious thing I've ever seen. Carol looked like she swallowed a lemon dipped in bleach. We high-fived. The revolution had begun. By sunset, the whole block was buzzing. The rolling lawn had gone viral. Neighbors texting neighbors, kids posting TikToks, local Facebook groups lighting up with posts like, "What is this green van on Oak Street?" Cut to the next day, my phone blowing up. Some people called me a hero, others called me insane. Both were right. Meanwhile, Carol was in full meltdown mode. She was out in her yard with the clipboard, taking photos from every conceivable angle, muttering to herself like a suburban supervillain. By that evening, new flyers were taped to every mailbox in Creekwood Commons. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m., topic, the grass menace. Yes, she actually called it that. Somewhere, George Lucas wept. The meeting was chaos from the start. The community clubhouse, usually empty except for 2 retirees complaining about mailbox paint, was packed, standing room only. Everyone wanted to see the showdown. Carol stood at the front like a dictator on the brink of overthrow, armed with a slideshow labeled Exhibit A, the van. Her PowerPoint included photos of every inch of the rolling lawn, close-ups, aerial shots, even a zoomed-in image of the gnome flipping the bird. This, she declared, voice trembling with indignation, is an affront to our community's aesthetic integrity. Gasps, murmurs. One guy in the back muttered, "It's actually kind of awesome." Carol ignored him. "It lowers property values. It mocks our bylaws. I raised my hand. She stopped mid-rant. "Yes, Mr. Peterson? I just want to point out, technically, it raises curb appeal." The crowd laughed. Carol's eye twitched. She launched into her next argument, clicking through slides like she was prosecuting a war crime. "I move that we fine Mr. Peterson $1,000 and demand immediate removal." A few board members nodded. The rest looked tired. One old man whispered, "Did we really call the cops over fake grass?" Then my turn. I walked to the front, binder in hand, calm, smiling like a man who knows his turf is bulletproof. "Good evening, everyone. My name's Alex, proud owner of the Rolling Lawn, now technically the greenest property in Creekwood Commons." Laughter rippled through the room. Now, Carol's right about one thing. This is about our rules. I read them. Actually, I memorized them. And nowhere does it say a lawn ornament has to stay still. Nowhere does it say it can't have wheels, or headlights, or a gnome co-pilot. I went through every line Sarah, my neighbor turned legal strategist, had highlighted. The height limits, the undefined good condition clause, the aesthetic loopholes. This isn't defiance. It's compliance, just creatively interpreted.
When your HOA drama makes it to the 6 o'clock news, you've officially graduated from resident troublemaker to local legend. But here's the real twist. The weirder I got, the more power I gained. Because in an HOA war, weirdness isn't weakness, it's strategy. After the HOA coup and Carol's dethroning, you'd think the neighborhood would calm down, maybe go back to arguing about mailbox paint and whether flamingos counted as tasteful. Nope. Instead, things escalated in the best possible way. Within 48 hours, my phone turned into a chaos hotline. Journalists, local radio, random YouTubers all wanted a piece of the story. Local man outsmarts HOA with fake grass van. Suburban outlaw turns fine into fine art. Even BuzzFeed called. And honestly, that one made me a little proud. I hadn't just made a statement. I'd started a conversation, and that conversation had legs and wheels. But while the internet laughed, I realized something deeper.
I'd stumbled into the perfect storm of legal gray area, public sympathy, and meme energy. Let me break that down. Because whether you're fighting an HOA, a petty boss, or your city's parking department, this is the formula for how weird can win. 1. The law is rigid, but loopholes wiggle. The first thing you learn about HOAs is that they love to sound official. They'll write bylaws like they're the Supreme Court of suburbia. But here's the thing. HOA rules only work when they're clear. If they're vague, you can drive a fake grass van straight through them. Terrell's favorite weapon, no commercial vehicles, fell apart the second I removed the lettering. What's left? Just a very enthusiastic lawn ornaments on wheels. By the letter of their own law, I was untouchable. The HOA bylaws also never defined what counted as good condition, so I argued that my rolling lawn was an excellent condition, drought-resistant, pest-free, and permanently green. I even offered to host a neighborhood watering ceremony. This is where you start seeing the power of creative compliance. When rules are absurd, meeting them too literally exposes how absurd they are. It's like fighting a bureaucracy with a mirror. 2. The optics game. Laugh and you win. Public perception is the HOA's Achilles heel. They can't handle looking ridiculous, and nothing makes them look more ridiculous than fighting a van that photo synthesizes. The day my story hit the local news, the HOA board tried damage control. They released a statement full of phrases like community standards and aesthetic continuity. But next to the image of a green van with daisies glued to the gas cap, it read like a parody. Every quote they gave became meme material. People online were writing captions like HOA, destroyer of joy, defender of beige. Man won bureaucracy. Grassroots rebellion. Literally. The HOA didn't just lose control, they lost narrative control. And once the court of public opinion starts laughing, no amount of legal jargon can unlaugh them. That's when I realized something vital. In the HOA battlefield, your best weapon isn't a lawyer, it's laughter. 3. Humor disarms authority. You can't argue with an HOA. They thrive on confrontation. But you can make them look silly, and that's even more effective. When they fine you, it's a transaction. When you outwit them with comedy, it's a transformation. See, Carol expected me to be angry. She expected another email, another argument, another desperate plea. Instead, she got a man rolling through the neighborhood in a lawn costume, waving like the Grand Marshal of a Home Depot parade. By turning the situation into a satire, I took away her script. She couldn't fight me without becoming the punchline. There's an old saying, never wrestle with the pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. With HOAs, I'd modify that. Never argue with the petty rule. Just make it absurd until it collapses under its own stupidity. 4. Media amplifies the madness. When the story broke, I was invited to a local morning show. The host asked, "What made you do it?" I said, "Because logic didn't work, so I tried landscaping." The clip went viral. People from all over the country started messaging me with their own HOA nightmares, from fines over garden gnomes to bans on basketball hoops. And that's when the next phase began. Influence. See, the HOA had tried to silence one person. Instead, they gave a microphone to thousands. That's the paradox of petty power. It always backfires in public. Even other HOAs started reaching out asking for policy advice. Imagine that. The guy with the rolling lawn was now a consultant. 5. Weirdness is immunity. Here's the secret no HOA manual tells you. The stranger your compliance, the harder it is to punish. If you're normal, they can fine you. If you're weird enough, they hesitate because nobody wants to be the villain in a story that makes them look like the final boss in a Dr. Seuss book. They operate on control. You operate on chaos. And chaos, when it's funny, is ungovernable. I once read that bureaucracy is allergic to imagination. The moment you start coloring outside their beige lines, they freeze. They can't compute rolling lawns or rebel gnomes. They can only fine you for what they can define. So when you show up to a meeting with turf samples and a PowerPoint titled, "Why My Van is a Metaphor for Growth," you win before you started. 6. Community is your superpower. Let's talk about Sarah, my next-door neighbor and co-conspirator. When she showed up with that box of plastic daisies and a gnome flipping the bird, she wasn't just helping me decorate. She was helping me build solidarity. Every HOA relies on silence. One person afraid to speak up, another too polite to protest. But the second neighbors start laughing together, the HOA's powers starts to crumble. After my speech at the emergency meeting, the crowd didn't just back me up. They flipped the entire power structure. For years, Carol had rolled through fear of embarrassment. Ironically, it was embarrassment that dethroned her. Community turned the HOA's greatest weapon against itself. 7. Strategy recap. The Weird War Playbook. If you ever find yourself battling an HOA with the soul of a dictatorship, here's your tactical manual, straight from the trenches of Creekwood Commons. Read everything. Knowledge is your sword. Find the loopholes. They hide in vague wording. Comply creatively. Give them exactly what they asked for, but in a way they never imagined. Laugh publicly. Petty power hates attention. Build allies. Your neighbors are your best defense. Use media wisely. Outrage is temporary. Humor lasts forever. Stay calm, stay clever, stay weird. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about exposing how silly control looks when it's enforced without compassion. Because at the end of the day, HOAs aren't fighting for beauty. They're fighting for uniformity. And uniformity dies the moment one person dares to be original. The aftermath, when absurd wins legally. After the news frenzy, the new HOA board actually reached out. They wanted to collaborate on revising the community's covenants to make them clearer and friendlier. You read that right. I went from that troublemaker with the van to committee advisor. We sat in that same beige clubhouse drafting new bylaws that were actually logical. One section even reads, residents may display decorative lawn art provided it does not cause unreasonable safety concerns or violate city ordinances. Mobile decorations are permitted with board approval. Mobile decorations. That's right, the rolling lawn clause, named after yours truly. Somewhere in the HOA multiverse, Carol Perkins screamed into a pillow. But this isn't just about me or my fake grass masterpiece. This is about every homeowner who's ever been told to tone it down, trim it back, or fit in. So in our grand finale, let's talk lessons. How to survive, thrive, and maybe even win your own HOA war with creativity and a little chaos. They fined me for parking my work van. I responded by growing a lawn on it. And somehow, that story turned into a movement. But beneath the laughter and fake grass lies something real, a survival guide for anyone living under the rule of the HOA overlords. When the dust finally settled, or rather when the glue fully dried, I realized that what started as a joke had become something much bigger. The rolling lawn wasn't just a prank. It was proof that creativity beats control, that humor outlasts hostility, and that sometimes the best way to expose absurdity is to out-absurd it. But for everyone watching, laughing, or plotting their own turf-wrapped vengeance, here's what I actually learned from the great HOA war of Creekwood Commons. Number 1. Bureaucracy feeds on fear. Starve it. The HOA's biggest weapon isn't their bylaws, it's your fear. They count on you folding, on you assuming they're untouchable, because their letters sound like they were written by someone with a law degree and a God complex. But most HOAs are like paper tigers, loud, official, but weak once you stand your ground. When you stop reacting with fear, when you respond with wit, data, or, say, a lawn that drives, you flip the script. They lose their power the second you stop playing by their emotional rules. Because let's be honest, their power isn't legal, it's psychological. They're betting that you won't call their bluff. So call it, loudly, and maybe with a gnome flipping the bird on your dashboard for emphasis. Number 2, rules aren't sacred, they're negotiable. One of the biggest myths people believe is that HOA bylaws are carved in stone. Nope, they're usually written by volunteers who argue over font choices and call it governance. These rules are only as strong as the people enforcing them and as clear as the words on the page. And if those words are vague, inconsistent, or outdated, they crumble under scrutiny. That's why reading the bylaws is your first act of rebellion. When I sat down with Sarah and went through every clause, line by line, we found contradictions that could fill a sitcom. One section banned commercial vehicles, but another allowed standard vans used for personal errands. Another defined decorative lawn ornaments, but forgot to say they couldn't move. Those gaps? That's where you plant your seeds of freedom. Think of it like gardening. HOAs grow weeds of control. Your job is to plant loopholes. Number 3, humor is a force field. Seriously, try getting mad at someone who's smiling while being ridiculous. When I turned my van into a lawn, I didn't just create a loophole. I created a joke no one could attack without looking joyless. Humor makes you untouchable. It disarms enemies, unites allies, and reframes the story. If I had screamed, written angry letters, or filed lawsuits, I'd have been another problem resident. Instead, I became the folk hero of Creekwood Commons, the guy who outwitted the HOA with the glue gun. Even the police officers couldn't stay serious. When authority figures start laughing, the battle's already over. So next time the HOA sends a passive-aggressive letter about your mailbox paint, respond with something unexpected. Politeness with a wink, a meme-worthy sign, or maybe a performance art piece called The Spirit of Noncompliance. They can fine your lawn, but they can't find your creativity. Number 4, community is contagious. Weaponize it. Here's something I didn't expect. How quickly laughter spreads. When I rolled Vanna White back into the neighborhood, I thought I was fighting alone. But people started cheering, laughing, filming, sharing. Suddenly, the same neighbors who'd been scared to defy Carol's taupe tyranny were cracking jokes about mailbox bylaws. Fear isolates. Humor connects. The moment your neighbors realize they're not alone, that they can laugh with you instead of bowing to someone, the HOA loses its monopoly on authority. That's how we took down Carol. Not with lawsuits, but with unity and laughter echoing through a beige clubhouse. Every sarcastic clap, every chuckle, every "about time someone said it" turned the tide. You don't need an army to win an HOA war. You just need neighbors willing to laugh louder than the rulebook. Number 5, absurdity is a mirror. Hold it up. One of the most powerful things you can do is reflect pettiness back to its source. The HOA claimed to protect aesthetic integrity, so I gave them aesthetics, too much of it. They said no commercial vehicles. Fine, I gave them a decorative masterpiece. They wanted conformity. I gave them creativity turned up to 11. And the result, their own rules collapse under the weight of their ridiculousness. Absurdity works because it reveals hypocrisy in 4K resolution. You're not breaking their system. You're showing the world how broken it already was. Number 6, winning doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like sanity. When I first started this war, I thought winning meant overturning the fine or beating Carol at her own game. But real victory wasn't about paperwork. It was about peace. Because the moment I stopped trying to convince them and started having fun, I got my life back. The HOA's letters didn't feel like threats anymore. They felt like invitations to the world's dullest talent show. Once you stop giving their power emotional weight, you win internally. And that's the only victory that matters. Remember, an HOA can't ruin your peace unless you let it. Number 8, the legacy of the rolling lawn. A few months after the Great Grass Rebellion, the new board officially rewrote the bylaws. They even added a clause, I'm not kidding, allowing mobile decorative displays. My van became an exhibit in the community newsletter titled Creative Compromise at Work. Apparently, I'm now a case study in conflict resolution. Funny because I remember it more as the time I lost 3 days of my life gluing grass to metal. But here's the thing. Every time I park Vanna now, someone stops me. They don't ask about woodworking. They ask about the story. How did you pull it off? What did the HOA say? And I always tell them the same thing. They said no, so I said lawn. Number 9, the grassroots philosophy. At the end of it all, the rolling lawn isn't just a van. It's a reminder of something bigger. In a world obsessed with uniformity, being weird is revolutionary. Whether it's an HOA, a boss, or a bureaucrat trying to box you in, your greatest weapon is your refusal to be boxed at all. You can't outpower a system like that, but you can outwit it, outlaugh it, and outlive it. Because control only works on people who take it seriously. Once you start laughing, they start losing. Number 10, the final trim, what it all means. When people see Vanna now, they smile. They take pictures. Some laugh, some shake their heads, and some ask if I mow it. Spoiler, I don't, but I do occasionally vacuum it. And every time I climb in, I remember that moment. The beige letter, the fine, the fury, and how something so petty created something so hilarious. HOAs exist everywhere, but so does creativity. And as long as there's one person willing to challenge pettiness with personality, conformity with chaos, and enforcement with art, there's hope. So if you're out there fighting your own HOA war, don't get bitter, get clever. Don't yell, create. And if all else fails, get some turf. Because sometimes the only way to fight stupidity is with a little glorious, unapologetic absurdity. So, what's the takeaway? Don't let anyone tell you what your home or your life should look like. Whether it's fake grass, flamingos, or freedom, own it. If you've ever gone toe-to-toe with your HOA, if you've ever been fined for existing, drop your story in the comments. The craziest one might just end up in our next episode of HOA Wars. And remember, stay clever, stay defiant, and keep your lawn rolling. They fined me for my van. Now it's the greenest victory in HOA history.